Hello everybody, Father Andrew here. Heads up, I'm going to be skipping her appearances in Dead Space 2 as she's purely a marker hallucination in that one, and this video is going to be primarily focusing on her other appearances that actually show us what she was like. Also, sorry if you can hear a fan running in the background. I'm using a small USB fan to help keep the peripherals on my computer cool, because for some reason the built-in fans on the external hard drives don't work anymore. Anyway, technical difficulties aside, in regards to who Nicole Brennan was, she was the senior medical officer aboard the USG Ishimura during the second Aegis 7 outbreak in 2508, and an initial survivor of the Necromorph outbreak aboard the Ishimura. On that note, Dead Space 1 doesn't really do much of her actual character outside of the marker hallucinations, which act very differently from her real self. Meanwhile, Dead Space Extraction, which was made exclusively for the Nintendo Wii and PlayStation 3, gives her noticeably more screen time, in which we actually get to see her go about her medical duties, which are described in the original Dead Space and its remake. Also on that note, considering she's like the main driving force for Isaac to actually try and find her on the Ishimura, I feel like we should have had more screen time for her in Dead Space 1 to give us a better understanding of what she was like, so we have a stronger incentive as the player to actually try and find her when Isaac sees the hallucinations of her. Which actually on that note, I want to talk about her personality and traits before I talk about anything else. The human Nicole, prior to her self-game end, can't believe I have to say that because it's damn platform, she was a compassionate and friendly woman, and also being a strong and capable medical officer in the midst of the total chaos we see throughout the events of Dead Space Extraction, remaining absolutely dedicated to her job and the welfare of the crewmen and colonists alike during the outbreak. Nicole also had a profound dislike for the Unitology religion, deeply as indicated by the fact that she was a specialist that helped people leave the church. And a comment about what she saw as, and I quote, fucking Unitology brainwashing, end quote, when she discovered that the Ishimura crew was largely replaced by Unitologists prior to the Aegis 7 mission. In fact, the Unitologists were such a pain in the ass she had to repurpose a secret room on the ship to run her counseling sessions without them interfering. She also had a deep, unconditional love for Isaac Clarke, wanting to see him again being her primary motivation to even survive the outbreak to begin with. Her final message to Isaac implying that, despite there being trouble in their relationship due to Isaac's prior outburst after the death of his parents, she forgave him and always loved him. Deeply wishing she could have had the chance to talk to him before her, self-game end, which she does to prevent herself reanimating and becoming a necromorph. Albeit considering what the marker is capable of, I don't think that would have done anything. And despite having near enough zero knowledge on the marker and the necromorphs at first, in what would be her final hours she became determined to learn about and study the creatures and the marker to try and find a way to completely stop the outbreak. Keep in mind, that's with Dr. Chalice Mercer's antagonism on top of that as well, and the horrifying experiences of dealing with the necromorphs. And finally, her hallucinations of Octavia Clarke created by the marker, which she used as a way to communicate with the marker and plead for it to end the outbreak. But when this completely fell through, she finally broke down and accepted that all hope was lost, resulting in the aforementioned self-game end. However, the hallucination counterpart encountered in Dead Space 1 and 2, which I'm gonna mention Dead Space 2 in this very briefly because she's just a hallucination in that. Anyway, as a hallucination, this nightmarish version of Nicole would be cold and influencing Isaac during his encounters with Marker 3A. And despite telling Isaac that she loved him and wished to be together with him, she'll completely brush off any attempt by Isaac to apologize for his crash out about his parents' death. Which on that note, considering Isaac had just lost his parents, and the fact that she was responsible for their care, like, she had Isaac's mother let out of the psychological care facility she was being held in. And then she went off on the Ishimura because Isaac suggested it, albeit she should have realized, hey, maybe letting someone out of a psychological care facility, like, while I'm not there and they could possibly relapse, that might not be a good idea. So why would she let them out before going on the Ishimura? It's just, she could have done that after she got back. Like, I get it, the dad finished his tour from his work on the other ships, but he could have just waited, or hell, he could have gone to the facility to visit her if it was possible. What I'm saying is, there was absolutely no reason for Nicole to let someone who could potentially relapse leave care like that when she's not around to take care of them. Terrible idea. So in my opinion, Isaac Clarke had every valid reason to crash out. Her terrible decision making was responsible for their deaths. But anyway, beside that, the hallucination version of Nicole would instead appear to be much more interested in the marker, along with showing Unitologist beliefs, which, on that note as well, like how the fuck did Isaac Clarke fall for Nicole hallucinations when she's outright saying shit like make us whole? Bro, she was against Unitology. You know she was trying to prevent your mother from, like, going back into that stuff or psychologically collapsing because of it. She was hard set against it. It's like in audio logs and shit that she was against it, and her spouting that should have been a massive red flag to Isaac that something was up, but no, he just falls for it. But anyway, aside from that, she goes out of her way to guide Isaac to bring the marker to its pedestal, using the term make us whole as mentioned. as to say that the two of them would finally be together again by allowing himself to see and be implanted with the marker signal and replicating instructions on Aegis 7, which they then use the eye-poking machine in Dead Space 2 to extract so that they can construct the marker in Dead Space 2. Isaac would through this become one with Nicole and together go on to build those markers through, the whole eye-poking machine. Which, by the way, I actually managed to beat the eye-poking machine first try. I don't know how people find that thing so difficult. Like, you can hear Isaac's heartbeat speeding up when you get closer. You just need to get close, stop, let him calm down, and I noticed that his eye, when it's moving around, is in a looping animation. There's a specific section where he's very focused in the sort of front area. That gives you a clean shot. You can just get that done super easy. Like, the environmental and audio cues for how you're supposed to do the minigame are right there, and surprisingly no one picks up on it. Like, there is literally a heartbeat counter and a distance counter below it in the background, bro. How does no one notice that? Anyway, eye-poking antics aside, during the events of Dead Space 2, Nicole would reappear, initially appearing with her face dripping with blood and going from friendly to hostile depending on Isaac's mental state, and her eyes glowing like an Agarth in Vril edit. She'd only take on a normal form after Isaac actually just kind of accepted that she was there. But overall, I'm gonna be honest, this version of Nicole is pretty much just the Dead Space 1 hallucination version, but you know what, I'm just gonna summarize both versions of her in the easiest way I can. The real Nicole was professional, caring, and concerned, while the hallucination Nicole, she's repetitive, aloof, and creepy, just completely focused on things that the real Nicole would never do. Like, seriously, how did Isaac not notice this complete behavior change? Like, a part of me suspects that maybe Isaac Clarke had gone fully insane during the events of Dead Space 1, and that some of the necromorphs we gunned down could have just been hallucinations, while Isaac's just going apeshit on some random survivors. He does seem to regain his sanity in the second game for a bit because of the memory erasing drugs which suppressed the marker's influence, but beside that. Honestly, being completely out of his gourd, that's the only way I could really see Isaac falling for these hallucinations and almost Nicole shit, bro. That, and I could totally see Isaac going absolutely postal and obliterating any survivors that come across his path, and only a few of them probably actually survive him because the marker's like, oh, we need them to physically do something. Make him see Nicole, and there you go. Like, there's a scene in Dead Space Remake, and I think in the first game as well, where you have to defend Nicole while she's like opening a door. If she dies, you fail. So it's possible the marker was just making him hallucinate another survivor as Nicole, because in the real ending, it's revealed that Isaac was hallucinating a completely different survivor as Nicole the whole time. So it makes complete sense that Isaac is just completely out of his gourd throughout most of the events of the first game. Anyway, beside that, for further elaboration on the aforementioned Octavia Clarke hallucinations, Nicole specifically had to use Mercer's research notes to actually gain the ability to do this, and there's actually a full transcript of her interaction with the marker via hallucination of Octavia. But the fact that she had to resort to using Mercer's research of all people shows just how much was actually needed to achieve this. And even then, it didn't really help her with anything, it just kind of drove her to, self-game end. God, I fucking hate doing that, like, I really hate having to say that because of this platform, like, ugh, it sucks. But anyway, that aside, during Nicole's conversation with the marker, which there's actually a transcription of, she asks the marker what it wanted to make the outbreak stop, but Octavia, the hallucination, simply told her to bring the marker's makers so it could bring a convergence event. Nicole explains that that's impossible. The marker told her to return it to its pedestal chamber on Aegis 7, concluding that if not the markers, then an architect will come. Realizing she could never return the markers on her own, and coming to terms with the fact that there's literally nothing she could do, she decides to, again, self-game end, leaving the final message for Isaac, which apologized to him and all that, which we already mentioned. Also, I think I made a mistake earlier, like, yeah, she gives herself at least a lethal dose to avoid being slaughtered by the necromorphs, not to prevent herself transforming. Yeah, I made a mistake earlier. Whoopsie doodles, the cookies are blue. If you get that reference, you are absolutely goated. Besides that, there's also a bit of trivia about this character I want to talk about. Doing some digging, I found that there's a full view model of Nicole's model from the introductory video of Dead Space 2, and there's an unused texture of Nicole wearing a black dress from Dead Space 2. Also during this video's research, I found out there's a Dead Space 2 DLC called Dead Space 2 Severed, which I'm never going to be able to play, because it was only available on the PS3 and the Xbox 360. Nice going, EA, you absolute turd in the punch bowl. Also, back to the trivia thing. I found out that Isaac Clarke, he was born on June 5th, 2461. With Dead Space set in 2508, that would make him 47 years old. And in 2505, 3 years before the game's events, Nicole was assigned to Octavia Clarke, which is how she met Isaac and fell in love with him, meaning he was 44 when he met her. However, Nicole does not have a canon age at all. In fact, she doesn't even have a birthday, weirdly enough. You would think a character this important to the main character's motivations would have something as simple as that, but no, she just doesn't. In fact, that's a gripe I have with the way she's written in general. She just doesn't have much to her outside of her work, really. That and her relationship and love for Isaac, but that's about it. In fact, we don't really have much background information on her to begin with. In fact, we know more about Isaac and a bunch of background characters than we do about her. Hell, we know more about Carver in Dead Space 3, the objectively worst Dead Space game. I will fight you on that. Dead Space 3 sucks, and I agree with Roanoke Gaming that whole game just feels like a complete hallucination made by the marker signal and the Brethren Moons. Especially the fact that you're on a planet covered in the things. Like, there's markers all over Tol Volantis. Which, on that note, the Dead Space 3 DLC. I hate that thing. I refuse to consider that canon at all. Because, yes, let's undermine everything Isaac Clarke fought for throughout the events of the last 3 games. Good idea. Totally won't piss off the fandom. Totally won't undermine the struggles of the characters, and undermine the whole narrative as a whole. Anyway, rant aside, Nicole as a character just feels shallow to me, and gonna be honest, I feel like they should have really done more of her in general. I feel like she should have got more screen time in the mainline original Dead Space 1 and its remake. That way to reveal that she's actually dead and it's a hallucination the whole time and that the marker was using Isaac would be a lot more tragic, because then you get a better idea of who she was beforehand. Like, really, you can summarize her whole character, like her actual human self, down into a skilled medical professional in love with Isaac who tries to stop the necromorph outbreak to see him again, but talks to the marker, realizes it's hopeless, and dies. And the hallucination version of herself is really just a puppet, a pale imitation being used by the marker to manipulate Isaac, and that's pretty much it. And honestly, it's a damn shame that that's all there really is to her, to be honest. I mean, she did stand up against Captain Benjamin Mathias, especially about Mercer's immoral, dangerous treatments of Harris, which I talked about in my Dr. Chalice Mercer video prior, and she was there for the 4 survivors in Dead Space Extraction, but outside of that, there's pretty much nothing to her in the mainline games. Like, I do like the fact Dead Space Extraction shows us more about her, but I feel like more could have been shown in the mainline game to make those two kind of connect a bit better. Like, yeah, there's audio logs and text logs, but I feel like more could have been added. Keep in mind, this hallucination of her is based off what Isaac knows of her, so maybe the marker could have, used that to hint some things about her, rather than it just be like a puppet that's fucking obvious from the beginning. But anyway, that's sadly all I really have to say on Nicole Brennan. Discord in the description, I guess. You can subscribe if you want to watch more videos in the future. Also have a Bitchute linked in the description because this platform's AI algorithm change is really annoying. I hate it. Videos aren't doing as good as they should. But yeah, that's all I have to say. I hope you enjoyed the video. Have a nice day. Goodbye, and hopefully I'll catch you next time.